Much of human behavior is governed not by what is openly spoken or visibly expressed, but by silent pressures carried deep within the mind. Individuals move through life bearing invisible weights, unresolved fears, quiet disappointments, unacknowledged doubts, and yet the world evaluates them primarily through outward actions. We are quick to judge reactions, moods, and decisions, while remaining unaware of the hidden emotional currents that generate them. A person's impatience may not arise from arrogance, but from exhaustion. Their withdrawal may not signal indifference, but inner conflict. The psyche rarely announces its burdens directly. Instead, it reveals them indirectly through tone, hesitation, defensiveness, or sudden shifts in behavior. What appears disproportionate or irrational often reflects tensions that have been accumulating long before any visible event. When unseen pressures intensify, even minor situations can provoke strong responses, not because the moment itself is overwhelming, but because it touches something already strained. Thus, observable conflicts are frequently only the surface expressions of deeper psychological realities, where emotions, memories, and interpretations converge beyond conscious awareness. To understand others, one must look beyond events and attend to the invisible architecture of their inner world. Human beings are not driven solely by present circumstances. They are guided by layers of past experiences, silent expectations, and subtle emotional associations. A simple interaction may awaken feelings rooted in earlier relationships, old disappointments, or long-standing insecurities. Yet because these forces operate quietly, both observer and participant may misread the situation. We respond to visible behavior without recognizing the unseen burdens shaping it. In doing so, misunderstanding becomes inevitable. True insight begins when we accept that what is hidden often holds greater influence than what is visible. Instead of asking only what someone did, one must also consider what they may be carrying internally. Beneath irritation may lie anxiety, beneath silence, uncertainty, beneath resistance, fear of vulnerability. Such reflection transforms perception. It replaces judgment with curiosity and reaction with awareness. When we acknowledge that unseen emotional burdens profoundly shape human behavior, we gain a deeper capacity for patience and empathy, recognizing that the most significant struggles are often those that never openly declare themselves. Human beings are rarely disturbed by events alone. Rather, they are shaped by the meanings they assign to those events. Beneath ordinary interactions, subtle psychological dynamics operate continuously, guiding perceptions, emotions, and reactions. Much of this influence remains unspoken, not because it lacks importance, but because it unfolds beyond immediate awareness. A gesture, a pause, a slight alteration in attention. These may seem insignificant on the surface, yet within the psyche they can carry immense symbolic weight. Individuals interpret experiences through deeply personal frameworks formed by memory, expectation, and emotional history. What one person regards as trivial may quietly unsettle another, not due to exaggeration, but because it resonates with unseen concerns. These dynamics create emotional responses that often appear mysterious or disproportionate when judged only by visible circumstances. However, the mind does not react strictly to objective reality. It reacts to perceived significance. Thus, relational tensions frequently emerge not from deliberate intent, but from interpretations that neither party fully recognizes. Without awareness of these underlying processes, misunderstandings multiply, leaving individuals puzzled by reactions whose origins remain concealed within the deeper layers of the psyche. Within close relationships, these subtle forces intensify, for emotional proximity amplifies psychological sensitivity. Every interaction becomes part of a silent dialogue where thoughts, fears, and expectations intersect. Individuals continuously influence one another through attitudes and emotional signals they may not consciously detect. A shift in warmth may evoke insecurity, while a perceived distance may awaken doubt. The struggle that follows is seldom communicated directly, for many internal conflicts resist clear expression even to oneself. Instead, tension manifests indirectly, through hesitation, defensiveness, or unexpected emotional reactions. What appears outwardly as mood or temperament often conceals a deeper psychological negotiation taking place beneath awareness. Recognition of this complexity transforms understanding. It reveals that much of human difficulty does not arise from overt actions, but from invisible processes of interpretation and projection. Awareness does not eliminate these dynamics, yet it allows one to approach them with patience rather than judgment. When we accept that individuals are deeply affected by psychological movements they rarely articulate, perception shifts. Behavior is no longer viewed as isolated or arbitrary, but as the visible expression of inner experiences shaped by subtle, often unseen relational influences. Inner struggles are seldom isolated phenomena arising entirely from within an individual. The human psyche exists in continuous relationship with its environment, especially with those to whom it is emotionally connected. What appears to be a private conflict may in fact be deeply intertwined with relational experiences. A person's anxiety, hesitation, or emotional turbulence often reflects not only internal conditions, but also the subtle tensions embedded in their interactions. Relationships carry psychological significance because they awaken expectations, fears, and memories that extend far beyond the present moment. A perceived shift in another's attitude may generate unease. An ambiguous silence may provoke doubt. An unnoticed change in behavior may stimulate reflection or insecurity. These reactions are not necessarily conscious or deliberate. Rather, they emerge from the psyche's tendency to interpret relational signals in ways shaped by prior experiences. Thus, inner distress may develop not as a solitary process, but as a response to dynamics unfolding between individuals. Without recognizing this interplay, one may misjudge both the origin and the meaning of emotional discomfort, attributing it solely to personal weakness or circumstance while overlooking the relational context that quietly sustains it. The mind is inherently responsive to connection, for human beings are psychologically formed through bonds long before they develop full self-awareness. Each meaningful relationship carries the potential to activate deeply rooted patterns of thought and feeling. When tensions arise, even subtly, the psyche attempts to reconcile conflicting interpretations. A person may struggle internally not because they lack clarity, but because they are navigating competing emotional impressions derived from relational experience. What seems like uncertainty may conceal a search for stability. What appears as withdrawal may represent an effort to preserve psychological equilibrium. The difficulty lies in the fact that such processes often remain invisible, both to the individual and to those around them. Misunderstanding then becomes inevitable. We observe behavior without perceiving the relational pressures influencing it. Yet awareness of this dynamic transforms perception. Recognizing that inner struggles frequently arise as reactions to relational tensions encourages a more nuanced understanding of human behavior. It reveals that emotional conflict is rarely confined to the individual alone, but emerges within the subtle, ongoing exchange between minds, where perception, expectation, and interpretation interact continuously beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Human beings often assume that emotional harm arises primarily from overt conflict, harsh words, visible disagreements, unmistakable hostility. Yet the psyche is frequently more affected by what is absent than by what is expressed. Silence, distance, and ambiguity possess a peculiar psychological power. When communication fades or emotional presence weakens, the mind does not remain neutral. It begins to interpret. In the absence of clarity, imagination fills the void. A delayed response may be perceived as disregard, a quiet withdrawal as rejection, a restrained tone as disapproval. These interpretations emerge not necessarily from reality, but from the mind's instinctive search for meaning. Because relationships are psychologically significant, even subtle disruptions in connection can generate disproportionate unease. Unlike open conflict, which at least provides definable content, silence offers no stable explanation. It leaves individuals confronting uncertainty, and uncertainty often intensifies emotional discomfort. The unseen narratives constructed within the mind can gradually produce tension more enduring than a direct disagreement. Thus, what is not said may echo more loudly than what is spoken, shaping emotional experience through suggestion rather than declaration. Distance, whether emotional or behavioral, introduces another layer of psychological complexity. The human psyche is attuned to continuity in relationships. It seeks recognizable patterns of interaction. When these patterns shift without explanation, the mind attempts to reconcile the change. A reduction in warmth, attention, or engagement rarely appears neutral to the one experiencing it. Instead, it may awaken doubt, self-questioning, or apprehension. The difficulty lies not merely in the change itself, but in the ambiguity surrounding it. Without explicit understanding, individuals may attribute meaning where none was intended. A protective retreat may be misread as indifference, personal preoccupation as intentional neglect. These misinterpretations do not arise from irrationality, but from the psyche's natural sensitivity to relational signals. Human beings respond not only to actions, but to perceived intentions, and perceived intentions are easily shaped by incomplete information. Over time, such dynamics can create emotional strain without any dramatic event occurring. The relationship appears outwardly intact, while internally unsettled by quiet uncertainty. Misunderstanding thrives most readily where clarity is absent. Open hostility, though uncomfortable, at least reveals its presence unmistakably. Silence and distance, however, obscure their meaning, inviting projection and speculation. Each individual interprets through the lens of personal history, expectations, and unspoken concerns. What one person experiences as harmless space, another may perceive as abandonment. Because these interpretations remain largely internal, both parties may remain unaware of the psychological consequences unfolding between them. This is why emotional wounds formed through silence or distance often persist with peculiar intensity. They lack clear origin, making resolution elusive. Awareness alters this dynamic. Recognizing that absence, ambiguity, and reduced communication can carry profound psychological effects encourages greater attentiveness to relational presence. It reveals that harm is not always delivered through confrontation. It may arise through uncertainty, where meaning is neither defined nor denied, yet deeply felt within the silent processes of the mind. Human perception is never entirely objective, particularly within relationships that carry emotional significance. The mind does not encounter others as neutral beings. It approaches them through layers of expectation, memory, and internalized experience. In this subtle process, individuals project. They attribute to others feelings, fears, or intentions that originate within themselves. Projection is not deception, but an inherent psychological mechanism through which the unfamiliar becomes interpretable. Yet its influence is profound. A person uncertain of their own worth may perceive criticism where none was intended. One who fears abandonment may sense distance even in ordinary variations of attention. These interpretations arise not from deliberate imagination but from deeply rooted emotional patterns shaping perception. Because projection operates quietly, individuals rarely recognize its presence. They experience reactions as responses to reality, unaware that inner anxieties or unexamined expectations are guiding their understanding. Thus, tensions may emerge without visible cause, generated by meanings that feel undeniable, yet originate partly within the observer's own psychological landscape. Expectations intensify this dynamic, for every meaningful connection carries implicit assumptions about behavior, attention, and emotional reciprocity. Often these expectations remain unspoken, existing as silent standards against which others are measured. When reality diverges from these internalized images, disappointment or confusion may arise, yet the discrepancy may reflect not failure but difference, the inevitable gap between perception and individuality. The difficulty lies in the mind's tendency to treat expectations as natural facts rather than subjective constructions. One begins to react not to what is, but to what was unconsciously anticipated. In this way, another's neutral actions may acquire unintended significance. A simple hesitation may be interpreted as avoidance, a moment of solitude as rejection. The psyche seeks coherence, and when confronted with ambiguity, it often fills gaps with emotionally charged interpretations. Such processes rarely remain isolated. They shape tone, behavior, and emotional atmosphere, influencing the relationship itself. The projected meaning then appears confirmed by the very reactions it helped produce, reinforcing misunderstanding. Fear further magnifies projection, as deeply held insecurities quietly seek expression through perception. What remains unresolved internally often reappears externally, attributed to the attitudes or intentions of others. A person may experience unease without recognizing its origin, sensing threat or disapproval where none objectively exists. These reactions are psychologically authentic even when factually inaccurate, for the mind responds to perceived meaning rather than detached reality. Awareness transforms this pattern. To recognize projection is not to deny feeling but to question its source. It introduces reflection where assumption once prevailed. One begins to ask whether perceived judgments truly originate from the other or from internal concerns seeking external form. In this awareness lies the possibility of clarity. Relationships then become less governed by unseen psychological distortions and more guided by conscious understanding, where perception is examined rather than unconsciously accepted as absolute truth. What appears as indifference in human behavior often conceals a far more intricate psychological reality. The outward signs, reduced communication, emotional restraint, apparent detachment, invite immediate interpretation, yet the mind's first conclusions are rarely complete. Human beings possess a remarkable capacity to mask inner turbulence behind composure or distance. A person may seem unaffected while internally navigating confusion, doubt, or emotional fatigue. The psyche does not always express distress through visible agitation. Frequently, it adopts stillness as a form of protection. Silence may not signify absence of feeling, but difficulty in articulation. Detachment may represent not disregard, but an attempt to preserve equilibrium amid competing emotions. Because observers naturally rely on visible cues, they may mistake guardedness for lack of care. Such misreadings are understandable, for the inner life remains inaccessible except through imperfect signals. Yet the disparity between appearance and internal state is a defining feature of psychological experience, where what is most influential often remains unseen. Emotional exhaustion further complicates perception. Individuals burdened by internal conflict or persistent uncertainty may gradually withdraw not from disinterest but from depletion. The mind, when strained, seeks relief through reduction of stimulation. What manifests externally as coolness or passivity may reflect an effort to manage overwhelming internal demands. Without awareness of this possibility, one risks interpreting behavior through a narrow lens, attributing motive where circumstance and inner struggle may be more accurate explanations. The difficulty lies in the human tendency to equate expression with intensity of feeling. When emotion is not openly displayed, it is assumed absent. Yet many experiences resist direct expression, particularly those involving vulnerability or unresolved thought. A person may struggle to reconcile contradictory impulses, desire for connection alongside fear of misinterpretation, need for clarity alongside uncertainty of outcome. These tensions rarely produce dramatic displays. Instead, they generate subtle shifts that are easily misunderstood. Recognition of this hidden complexity transforms relational understanding. To question the surface meaning of indifference is not to deny observable behavior, but to acknowledge that visible signals may carry layered significance. What seems like withdrawal may be reflection. What resembles coldness may be caution. What appears as certainty may mask hesitation. Awareness encourages restraint in judgment and openness in interpretation. It replaces assumption with curiosity, allowing space for realities that remain unspoken. Human behavior, viewed through this lens, becomes less a fixed declaration of intent and more an evolving expression of inner conditions. In this perspective lies the possibility of patience, for understanding emerges not from immediate conclusions, but from recognizing that the most decisive psychological movements often occur beneath the quiet surface of outward appearance. Every relationship, regardless of its form, awakens psychological patterns that precede the present moment. Human beings do not enter connections as blank states shaped solely by current circumstances. They carry within them accumulated impressions of past experiences, emotional memories, and deeply rooted expectations. When two individuals interact, their exchange is influenced not only by conscious intention, but by unseen structures formed long before the encounter. A tone of voice, a gesture, a moment of hesitation. These may activate associations that have little to do with the immediate situation, yet profoundly shape perception. The mind continuously compares present interactions with internalized templates derived from earlier bonds, often without deliberate awareness. Thus, reactions within relationships may appear sudden or disproportionate, not because the present event is inherently intense, but because it resonates with earlier emotional experiences. What feels like an immediate response may, in reality, be the echo of patterns silently carried forward. These unconscious patterns possess remarkable persistence, for the psyche seeks familiarity even when familiarity reproduces discomfort. Individuals may unknowingly recreate emotional dynamics that mirror earlier relational experiences, interpreting present behavior through frameworks established in the past. A neutral silence may awaken old anxieties. A minor disagreement may revive deeply embedded fears. A subtle distance may evoke uncertainty disproportionate to observable reality. Such responses are rarely calculated. They arise from automatic psychological processes guiding interpretation. Because these mechanisms operate beneath conscious recognition, individuals often attribute reactions solely to the present, unaware of the historical layers influencing their emotional responses. Misunderstanding then becomes inevitable. One believes they are reacting to what is happening now, while the psyche is responding partly to what has been experienced before. Awareness of this phenomenon alters perception. It reveals that relational tensions frequently involve not only two individuals, but also the invisible presence of past impressions shaping current understanding. Recognition of unconscious influence does not diminish the reality of emotional experience. Rather, it clarifies its origins. To understand that present interactions may activate long-standing psychological patterns introduces a deeper form of reflection. Instead of viewing reactions as entirely caused by immediate circumstances, one begins to consider the continuity of inner experience across time. This awareness softens rigid interpretations and reduces impulsive judgment. It encourages patience, for behavior once perceived as inexplicable may be understood as the expression of deeply embedded psychological tendencies. Relationships then become arenas not merely of interaction but of revelation, where unseen aspects of the psyche surface through ordinary exchanges. In acknowledging this complexity, individuals gain the capacity to respond with greater insight, recognizing that the present moment is rarely isolated, but interwoven with the enduring patterns carried quietly within the human mind. Awareness begins as a subtle disturbance in certainty, a quiet recognition that one's immediate interpretations may not reveal the full truth of experience. Human beings are naturally inclined towards swift conclusions, constructing explanations that preserve coherence and emotional comfort. Yet genuine reflection interrupts this tendency. It invites the individual to observe thought itself, to examine not only external events, but the inner processes through which meaning is assigned. In this shift from reaction to observation, guilt, blame, and resentment lose their apparent solidity. They are revealed not as fixed realities, but as psychological responses shaped by perception, expectation, and memory. What once appeared as unquestionable judgment becomes open to reconsideration. Reflection does not erase emotional intensity, nor does it demand self-denial. Rather, it introduces distance between experience and interpretation, allowing the mind to perceive its own movements. Within this space, the individual recognizes that feelings, however compelling, may carry layers of origin extending beyond the present moment. Blame, when unexamined, possesses a deceptive simplicity. It assigns cause with conviction, attributing discomfort to external sources while obscuring the complex interplay of perception and internal disposition. Yet awareness gradually reveals that many conflicts derive not from singular actions, but from reciprocal interpretations. Each participant in a relationship navigates a private psychological landscape, filtering events through personal histories and implicit expectations. Reflection exposes this mutual subjectivity. It transforms rigid narratives into inquiries, replacing accusation with curiosity. One begins to ask how personal assumptions, fears, or unnoticed sensitivities may contribute to emotional tension. In doing so, responsibility acquires a deeper meaning. It no longer implies fault but recognition of influence. Resentment, often sustained by unquestioned interpretations, weakens when the individual confronts the possibility of misperception. The mind, once defensive, becomes receptive to nuance. Emotional reactions that seemed entirely justified may be understood as responses shaped by unseen psychological dynamics rather than objective certainty. Through sustained awareness, understanding emerges not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual reorganization of perception. Reflection cultivates tolerance for ambiguity, acknowledging that human interactions rarely conform to singular explanations. This tolerance diminishes the urgency of judgment, permitting a more patient engagement with emotional complexity. Guilt softens into insight, blame into comprehension, resentment into perspective. Such transformation does not require denial of pain or conflict. It requires only the willingness to examine the inner structures through